Hello, my friends. It is day 233, and we're reading Jeremiah chapter 41 through Jeremiah chapter 45. And before we get into today's recap, I want to thank you for taking a moment to check out this video. Hopefully, you're finding the yearly Bible reading program to be incredibly helpful, to be an incredible blessing to you as you read the Bible every single day. If you have not yet accepted the invitation, you can check out the description box below, and there you will find a link that will take you directly to the YouVersion Bible app, where you can join a number of people reading the Bible every single day and leaving feedback on the things they're learning. We'd love to have you a part of the group, and we'd love to engage with you as we study the Bible together. Now, today we're reading back in the book of Jeremiah, and there are a number of things that we are finding as we get to the end of this book, even though we're still a solid 10 chapters or so, just under 10 chapters away from reading this or completing this book. But it is showing us a number of things that are happening. And I want to say this is very indicative of the nature of an exile, the nature of what some will call a hostile takeover. When a territory is invaded by a stronger empire, these kinds of things happen. And we see in chapter 41 where Gedaliah who is the governor that was appointed by the Babylonians, is actually murdered. And we see there are a number of things done to try to overcome the different forces that be, and there's just a lot of contention. What it reminds me of is whenever Adam fell in the garden and you started seeing men war against one another and fight against one another, trying to dominate one another. And I think this is the point that, well, I won't say this is the central point of this text, but it is a byproduct of a bigger issue. It is the byproduct, what we read in chapter 41 and other places in the Bible, all the relations of warfare and all these different things. It is a byproduct of the fact that the moment Adam sinned, he then had this provocation, this impulse to redirect his dominion from the thing that God had originally designated it to something that he was never supposed to have dominion over. And what that is that dominion that he's supposed to exercise over land, over animals, over, responsibilities concerning crops and farming and all those different things, is now designated to other human beings, which is something that was never supposed to happen. And it is from that central change in humanity, due to the fall and the influence of the knowledge of good and evil, that we find the sort of contention that is ongoing from that moment even to the very moment that we're reading today. And so all of this, it is obviously there are some specific, things that led up to that. But essentially, this is what we find happening. Okay. Now, when we get in chapter 42, we see that there are a number of things happening there. There's this provocation, this encouragement for people to stay put in Judah. And there's this specific word that I thought was incredibly important, considering the times that we're living in. Because if many people are being destroyed by war, famine, and all these other things, then there's a promise out there that mandates a sense of protection around a certain group of people within the tribes of Judah. And that is what we call the remnant. And this is what you see in chapter 42, verse 19. It says, "Listen, you remnant of Judah." You see what's going on here? The full wrath of God is being poured out upon Judah. But there is a cluster of people left, a remnant, if you will. And he's telling them, don't go to Egypt. Don't forget this warning I've given you today, for you were not being honest when you sent me to pray to the Lord your God for you. You said, just tell us what the Lord our God says, and we will do it. And today I have told you exactly what he says, but you will not obey the Lord your God any better now than you have in the past. So you can be sure that you will die from war, from famine, disease in Egypt, where you insist on going. Again, you see the people of God trying to avoid the punishment that God has designated to them by being submitted to other governments and other empires, which is completely against what God has commanded. What God is getting them to do is accept the chastisement, accept the fact that you're wrong, learn from it, do better. But what they're trying to do is avoid it by partnering with these other pagan nations, which the Lord will obviously destroy while also addressing their failure to obey and comply. So you see Judah trying to do that, and there's a number of things that they'll have to pay for because of that. Another thing that stood out in today's reading is chapter 44. Okay, when you look at chapter 44, you see that there's this continual criticism of their idolatry, which was common. But the thing that was interesting about this passage is the way in which, men and women obviously were committing idolatry. But it was interesting to me to hear in verse 15 how, all this idolatry was going on in Judah. Obviously, they're known for their idolatry. But the women were saying, what we were doing, our husbands were fully aware of it. And again, that takes me right back to the Garden of Eden. For some reason, the Garden of Eden, these things that are written seems to resonate or connect with the Garden of Eden theme. And I'm thinking to what Adam did in that garden, his lack of responsibility towards Eve in that moment, which seems to be parallel to what we see in this passage where the women are saying, well, our husbands were right there when we were burning the incense, when in actuality, they probably should have been the first to, not only stop it, but lead other people to worship as the responsible parties over or within the household. Do you get what I'm saying? So we're seeing the effects of the fall play out in Israel's story. And what it is confirming to us is that something we'll learn later as we read into the New Testament. It is confirming to us that what happened in the fall of Adam is not just specific or designated to the nations. This problem is found among God's own people. And it is that causes them to pull away from God and disobey and rebel and believe and worship other gods. It is that central, that very powerful reality that everyone, including God's own people, are full of sin. They have an impulse. They have an inward desire to follow other things, not follow God, to accept other things and not accept God. And we see that playing out over and over and over and over and over again. And so it is interesting to see that, while in one moment Habakkuk would be saying something like we read on yesterday, how dare you, how could you use them to judge us? When in actuality, what we're seeing as we read through Jeremiah is the question is that he should probably have asked is, how dare we look as closely to them as we look and think that God should have mercy on us? That's probably the best answer, the best question maybe he could have asked in that scenario. But today's reading was, again, another eye-opener, and it is incredibly helpful to see ourselves in the story of Israel. And I hope that's what you're able to do. I hope you're able to see yourself in the story rather than saying, wow, look at those bad Israelites. That's not the point. The point is to show us that we all share a common problem. And in one way or the other, the things we're reading in this story, we can be observed in the world that we're living in and among the people that we dwell among. So may the Lord help us all, right? And may he strengthen us to be more like him. Let me know what your thoughts are. Leave them in the comment box below. I'd love to hear what you're thinking and how you think it relates to what we're reading. Let's continue to go through the journey. We are on our way to finishing the Bible this year, and I'd love for you to meet us at the finish line. Until then, let's keep reading. Take care. God bless. And remember, live by the word.